Why are you recording him inside?
And he will not give me that answer if he keeps talking away from
I'm
me.
definitely not answering questions to you guys, but...
Okay, I'll hold him, go see if they'll sign a complaint for disorderly
Absolutely.
conduct. Why are you being
And
that
his
way,
phone is
dude?
still recording,
Like
so
what?
just-
Hey, can I not
You can
photograph on the sidewalk?
Why wouldn't you stop when she asked you to?
Do I have to?
Yes.
Was I being detained?
Yes.
What crime was I suspected of committing?
You really want to go that route?
What crime
We're
was I
investigating somebody acting in a disorderly manner.
How?
You're video recording a nursing home and
But
you were upsetting the
photography
residents.
on the sidewalk. Do
Okay.
I can answer questions? No, I don't.
Wow.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. This is the beginning of a series of videos I'll be featuring on the channel entitled Things Everyone Should Know About Police Encounters. I won't be discussing traffic stops in this video, as traffic stops have their own set of rules that are a little bit different as far as the obligations to the public, but I'll be addressing that in the future in a separate video. Now, without further ado, let's get into Things Everyone Should Know About Police Encounters, Volume 1. The first thing we're going to talk about is consensual encounters. And it's important to note that most encounters with the police begin as consensual encounters. So long as it's consensual, that means that the citizen is in control of how long it lasts. That also means that the citizen can simply ask if they're being detained, and if the officer says no, they can let the officer know they don't consent to the encounter and they'd like to be free to go, or they can just simply walk away. Now, many such encounters will include a request or outright demand by the officer that the citizen provide an ID or otherwise give identifying information. In most jurisdictions, this is not required in the absence of a crime. However, people should familiarize themselves with the law where they are so they don't run afoul of some rule regarding identifying information. Remember that the things a citizen says during the consensual encounter can be used to escalate the encounter to one that is non-consensual. For instance, if an officer asks a person how much they had to drink today and the person says, "I've had 31 margaritas," well, it's pretty likely that encounter will move from consensual to non-consensual very quickly. I know we're all familiar with the words, "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law," from a Miranda warning. But if you think about it, we never make it to a court of law if the things that a person says is not used against them on the street in order to get into a court of law to begin with. And that moves us into non-consensual encounters or investigatory detentions. The United States Supreme Court in the landmark case Terry versus Ohio laid out the rules which govern non-consensual police encounters. And it was the first time that the legal doctrine reasonable articulable suspicion was given a platform. The court said of reasonable articulable suspicion, or RAS, that it has to be more than a mere hunch. A hunch might be something like, hey, that guy's walking around with a $4,000 camera dressed like a normal person filming a public building in the middle of the day. That's weird. I wonder if he's going to come by and blow it up later. That's a hunch, an unreasonable one at that. So that can't be the basis for someone being detained on the suspicion of a crime. According to Terry, there must be specific articulable facts that would lead a reasonably cautious man to conclude that criminal activity is going on. This is why you often hear auditors making the statement that they can't be detained unless the officer can articulate that they are suspected of having committed a crime, are currently committing a crime, or are about to commit a crime. Now, a fact-gathering exercise like this, where you try to determine why you're being detained, can be very useful, but not for the reasons you might think. We'll explore that a bit later. This is what reasonable articulable suspicion might look like. An officer tells the court during testimony, "I've been a patrol officer for 2 years. And I patrol the same area 5 nights a week on midnight shift. I know the business closes at 5, and I know the owners, and I know that they have 5 employees, and I know what all of them drive. On the night in question, I saw a vehicle that I didn't recognize as belonging to anyone who worked there parked next to the loading dock doors after midnight with an individual standing outside of it that I didn't recognize, and I was concerned that there might be a burglary in progress. So I went up and interviewed the person." That is what reasonable articulable suspicion looks like. However, it's important to understand that while there's value in the auditors taking this position, or people taking the position that they want an explanation, there's a difference between an officer having legal justification and the officer being required to disclose it to the person. Now, despite what is commonly displayed in YouTube videos, and despite the fact that we can all agree that it would be a better act of community service, or better in fostering the relationship between the police and the public, the police do not have to explain themselves to citizens by law. Now, there may be a policy-based obligation to do it, similar to an officer having to give their name and badge number if a citizen asks. But as far as legally speaking, the law does not impose a duty on a police officer to explain why they're there, what they're doing, and what they're investigating. The only articulation that an officer has to do is to the court in the charging documents or to the court in testimony. Now that moves us into the areas of rights and responsibility. I'll say it now and I'll repeat it again. The people have most of the rights and the police have most of the responsibility. But one of the responsibilities the police have is not to tell you the truth. In fact, an officer can omit things that they don't think that they want to tell you in the situation. For instance, an officer may suspect that the person he's dealing with is the person whose photograph was passed around at his roll call meeting at the beginning of his shift. The person may be wanted for homicide in another jurisdiction and is alleged to be armed and dangerous. There's no court in the land, in the United States, anywhere, who's going to require that officer to walk up to that person and say, "Hey, aren't you Joe Smith that's wanted for murder in Florida? And aren't you supposed to have an AK-47? Turn around and put your hands behind your back." No court anywhere in the country is going to require that of a police officer. So in that way, the police have their own quasi-right to remain silent, or right to omit information. But not only that, they can blatantly lie to you in the course of furthering their investigation. We've all seen the scene in a crime drama where the detective walks into an interview room holding a Ziploc bag with a hair that he just put in it in a neighboring room that has no connection whatsoever to the crime, and says to the suspect as he slams it down on the table, "If you didn't commit this murder, why is your hair in my crime scene?" And this, of course, is followed by a scripted full confession by the suspect. That's real life. That stuff happens, and that conduct has been ratified and upheld by the courts time and time again. So you might be thinking, well, why ask them why I'm being detained if they have no obligation to answer my question? Well, the same reason that many of them ask citizens tons of questions that the citizens have no obligation to answer. They might answer, and if they answer, they might be stuck with what they say. So there's plenty of value in the citizen demanding to know why they're being detained and getting the officer, hopefully on record because they're being recorded, cornered into some sort of a narrative. So that way if they say A, B, and C on the recording, they can't come into court at preliminary hearing or put it in their warrant that it's D, E, and F without somebody being able to challenge their credibility. So that's why you ask them for their reasons, because you want to be able to challenge your credibility and use it to prove, look, this is a fishing expedition and I didn't do anything. Sadly, on top of not having to explain themselves or tell the truth, police officers can also be 100% wrong about what they suspect. The courts have blessed them tremendously with a legal doctrine referred to as objective reasonableness. And this basically means that even if an officer is completely mistaken as to what he thought you were doing, what crimes he may have thought you were committing, what the articulable facts were, that there were articulable facts, any number of things. So long as the courts can look at the situation objectively, not what this subjective police officer thought in the moment, but what would a reasonable, well-trained police officer in the same situation, with the same resources and the same amount of experience, have thought about what this person was doing. If the answer is that what was going on was reasonably articulable and suspicious, that conduct's going to be upheld. And the last thing we're going to talk about is that people have no obligation to assist the police in an investigation outside of possibly giving identifying information depending on the jurisdiction, as previously mentioned. Now think about the way most of life works. If someone is asking for assistance, it's very likely that they're doing that because they can't do it on their own. And if they're asking you specifically for assistance, it's possible that you're just convenient and you're somebody that they know and they know that you'll help them. But it's also possible that you're the only person who can help them do the thing that they're trying to do. And citizens should assume that if they're being asked specifically by the police to participate in an investigation, that they are the only people who are the custodians of the evidence that might be used against them to later prosecute them for a crime. And they should safeguard that evidence to the very best of their ability because people have a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate themselves. So it would be wise for citizens to limit the communication with the police to asking questions of the officer in an effort to gather information from the police and box them into a narrative as opposed to actually giving information to the police. Unfortunately, even though the police can lie to you, that doesn't mean you can lie to the police. While citizens are under no obligation to answer questions in most jurisdictions, if they choose to answer, they are under an obligation to tell the truth. For instance, if an officer asks a citizen for their identifying information and the citizen gives them a name of some other person or changes the date of birth or some identifying number or something to try to lead the police off of the trail of who they actually are, most jurisdictions have a false report statute that criminalizes that behavior. So it's really best to remain silent and not say anything so that they don't back their way into a crime that they didn't know existed. In conclusion, it's important to understand that in a police encounter, the people have most of the rights and the police have most of the responsibility. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not condoning these police tactics. I'm not saying I support these opinions that ratify that conduct. In fact, I think there's been a substantial erosion of our civil rights over the last several decades. I'm just saying that's the way the law is. It is our obligation to safeguard our own freedom by understanding the rules of the game and who the players are. And if it doesn't matter enough to us to protect it, then we can't complain when it's gone. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let me know in the comments how you feel about the content, what you think about this situation, and what other videos you might be interested in seeing. I've put up some tiles for some other videos on the channel. Please give them a watch and let me know what you think about them also. We'll see you next time.